Everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Answers Podcast. And today I have another guest. And my guest and I are going to get into a more in-depth discussion about, as he likes to say, the intersection between work and health. And the challenges that occur with a lot of what we do in life has an impact, either good or bad, on our health and our well-being. And sometimes we have to get somebody well, we actually have to change some of their habits, some of their behaviors, some of their routines. And sometimes to try and get somebody to change some of these hardened habits and behaviors is really difficult. And it's very stressful for people to try and make some changes. And it doesn't, to some of us, it doesn't seem like a really big deal. Hey, just change what you're eating, change your routine, do some exercise, work on your breathing, work on these things that seem like, hey, they're not that hard to do. Why are we making this more complicated? But there's something to trying to change habits and behaviors that can add more stress to somebody who's already stressed and put them more into what we talk about sometimes, a cell stress or cell danger response that affects not only their thyroid physiology, but really all of their physiology. So today's guest is Will Welch. He is a board certified functional health coach and actually a leadership and development coach. And as I said, he kind of blends like how to tie, and I'll let him talk about this in a little bit, how to tie work and health so that they're not mutually exclusive, but mutually inclusive of each other. So Will, thanks for coming on the podcast today. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks, Eric. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with your audience, talking about this topic and the intersection of all those things that you just mentioned.
So first of all, let's get a little bit of your backstory. Like, who's Will Welch, and how did you get to this space? Because people really, for people to listen and really say, okay, this is a person I need to listen to, they need to have your backstory, they need to know a little bit about you and what sets you apart from some other like health coach or business guru that's that they can find on the web somewhere.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the long and winding path to get here, I'll make it a short explanation. So when I first stumbled across psychology, I think it was in undergrad, just absolutely fascinated by the human puzzle and how all these pieces fit together. And I wrapped up undergrad doing a bunch of research on the effect of stress on physical health, and was able to see some really interesting connections to psychologically stressful experiences that showed up in the body. It's everything that we know about hormones and cortisol and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely fascinated by that. But I was like, I'm never going to earn any money in that field. I'm going to go into business. So I got a graduate degree in organizational psychology, started working in industry, and just was continually fascinated by how work showed up for people, whether it was leaders and the challenges that they had and the pressure they put on themselves and the physical toll that ended up taking on them, people burning out and leaving. So then all of that stuff was starting to come full circle. Wow, that work experience really impacts people's health. How can I bridge that gap? How can I support those folks? So that's when I found health coaching and the psychology behind change and how to move people from where they are to where they want to be. And kind of reflecting on what would be really helpful for folks, given my experiences, it's really that intersection, as you described, between work and health. And I know Thyroid Answers Podcast, people might be saying, well, what does this have to do with thyroid? We talked about the cell danger response and that experience of being under stress, that threat, that fight, flight, or freeze response that people can get into. I've spent a lot of my career looking at that, and work is such an impact on how we think, and then what effect that has on our bodies, in particular the thyroid.
Yeah. So when I talk about thyroid physiology quite a bit, I always talk about it that usually in most cases, at least early on, thyroid physiology is often not broken, but adapting to the stress that we put the body under. And it's like the dimmer switch that either turns on metabolism and turns off the immune inflammatory cell death defense response, or it is we're using it as a dimmer switch to turn down normal metabolism and turn on that cell stress response, that immune inflammatory protective response. And so unfortunately, it causes symptomatology, right? And we don't feel good and we think that we're broken, when in reality, the body is doing exactly what it should do under a stressful situation. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I think one of those things that I think becomes really important is talking about the role of a health coach. I think I've had a couple health coaches on, but can you explain to somebody the difference between maybe the functional medicine practitioner, somebody like me, versus somebody who's getting educated as a health coach? Are they doing the same thing? Are they doing two different things? Should they be working together? How do you lay out the role of what a functional health coach is, or a health coach is, and what their role and responsibility is, and how it differs from maybe the physician?
Yeah. You identified a little bit of a gap historically in the healthcare model. It's, as you identified before, there are a lot of what's, like diagnostics and treatment protocols are about identifying what to do. Like, here's where we want to get you. And the question is, how do you get there? And there's a certain percentage of the population out there, fantastic self-starters. They can go out there, they can identify those hows, they can put those things into play. But for a significant portion of the population, the confidence to make change, the ability to put changes into motion and then make them stick long-term is really, really difficult. And that's where health coaches come in. And in particular, functional health coaches who are concerned about root causes are a great match for functional health practitioners. And I almost look at health coaches as a bit of a hub. So I work with a client and I ask them, so what are your challenges? Who are you working with? What are they telling you? And it might be that they're working with a functional health practitioner. And we talk about, do you understand some of the challenges that you're facing? Do you understand the treatment protocol? How much of a challenge is that for you? And so we start to unpack the obstacles that they're anticipating to kind of meet the treatment protocols that they've worked on with a practitioner. But it may be that they also need a dietitian. It may be that they also need a mental health professional. It may be they also need a personal trainer. And so as a health coach, I'm looking at the entire network of support for my clients and trying to help figure out what combination of things is really going to be the best fit for my client. And I think that's where health coaches play such a significant role. It's not just about kind of cookie cutter plans, this diet or this workout plan or this protocol. It's what's the best fit for that person in their life right now to meet the goals that they want to meet.
So would you say that in many situations, you've got a clinician, and I may be a great example of this. I'm really into the nerdy, sciencey pathway stuff. And just based on my background, I'm a little bit more disciplined at doing things, and I don't think about necessarily motivation of doing things. It's just like, hey, this needs to be done, you get it done, right? And man, maybe I'm a cold-hearted dude every once in a while, but I'm just like, well, just do it, right? But maybe the role of that health coach is to say, hey, not only we need the sciencey expertise thing, and some people can just take that and roll, and other people need a lot more support in their ability to make some change. And that may not be the skill set of a specific physician, or it may be that while that thing is really important, the individual physician does not have the time, nor does that person maybe want to pay that physician for that time. And that's where the health coach could come in and say, hey, I know this is what needs to get done. This is where you are. Let me help you get more granular with how we can make some of these changes so they don't look like such big hurdles. They don't look like such adversity, because at the end of the day, much of the stuff that we're asking people to do when we're trying to help them improve their health and get well and recover from the conditions, they're not they're fairly simple things, but they're not always easy to accomplish, right? Do you see that? Am I explaining that role? Does that make sense to you how I see it?
Absolutely. Frankly, the simple but easy aspect of it is such a trap for people trying to make changes, because you're staring at something that seems so simple and you should be able to do it. And you're running into challenges. I mean, people have to work X number of hours a day, and they have to get the proper amount of sleep, and they have to eat right, and they have to remember to take their supplements if they're on that. Maybe they're changing their eating pattern completely. Some of those things seem quite simple in isolation, but that you stack them up and you try to make sense of that bigger picture. And how much time are you getting with your clinician, your practitioner, somebody who can sit down with you and just say, tell me how it's going. What is the one thing that is you're really struggling with? Let's unpack that a little bit. Is there something else in your life that you've tried to do that's similar that you actually knocked out of the park? What was the key to your success there? And so we can bring some of those things from the past that they've really succeeded with into the present time, where they have maybe 5 things they're working on, isolate one thing to work on that a little bit, and start to get some traction. Because sometimes these cases are complicated and challenging, and there's only so much time to talk to the clinician about what to do. And the health coach can say, you know what? Nothing has to be perfect. Let's say you have a goal to hit something 100%. You get 80% of the way there. That's 80% better than if you didn't have that goal in the first place. And we can work with that. And oftentimes I've worked with clinicians about, okay, well, what's the bottom line here? If the client doesn't do X, what's going to happen? So that we kind of know where the benchmarks are. And then we can work with the client and say, hey, look, this is the really critical point for you. And there might be a few ways to get at that outcome. So let's try to figure out and experiment with what's the best way to get you there.
Yeah. And when we talk about improving somebody's health, so their well-being, their sleep, their fitness, their diet, ultimately something or many things has to change, right? Yeah. And so the challenge is balancing because we talk about excessive stress, and that's, sometimes when people hear that term, they think it's just emotional stress, right? And it's not just emotional, it's physical, it's chemical, it's respiratory, it's organisms, it's everything when we talk about stress. And stress, not necessarily a bad thing. There's what we call a hormetic effect. So no stress is not good. A moderate amount of stress that we allow for recovery is good, really good, because it makes us stronger. And then excessive stress without recovery can be problematic. So most of the people that we're seeing with chronic health issues are already in an excessive stress state, right? And so asking them to change can be doing opposite of what we want them to do, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a paradox.
It's
you need to change to improve your health, but the act of changing is stressful and undermines health. And so what do you do with that? It's a bit paradoxical.
So why is it so stressful to change?
Yeah, I think some of the changes that we're talking about and the scale of change for health improvement, it's total body. You're talking about mind, you're talking about the emotions of change, you're talking about the physical aspects of it. And what I often come back to is there's this great model in the stress literature that looks at demands and resources and how somebody perceives a change that's coming towards them. And I might have a change that requires a lot of me. The demands are super high, but you know what? I have incredible resilience. I have this amazing social support network. I have great people I'm working with on my health team, and those resources are meeting those demands. Everything's kind of even. So you know what? I'm up for this challenge. I'm ready to go. This doesn't feel super stressful. It's like that hormetic stress part of the stress curve. Mm-hmm. But for other people, they don't have the resilience. Maybe they don't have the support team around them. Maybe their family's like, really? You're going on this diet? Like, that stinks. We're going to have to change our food habits too. So the same change experience, the same thing that somebody has to change could be stressful for one person and not the other, depending on those resources. So the idea that I have to make these changes and I don't have the resources, and I have to do something that for me might move me away from the eating habits of my family. I might have to grieve the loss of a particular meal I love. That's what makes change so physical. And it's not just a mental obstacle that we have to overcome. It's not just a physical thing of now I have to go run a few laps. There's an emotional component, a mental component, and a physical component. And so I think working with a health coach who can look at each of those three pieces, explore those and unpack those can be really beneficial for lowering that barrier and increasing those resources to meet the demands. Like, what's a strength that's you've leaned on in the past? Are you resilient? Are you creative? Are you humorous? How can you bring that into the equation, lean on that to help you get to that next level and make that change?
Yeah, and I think sometimes we have to help people with, I think when they need to make change, they think of all the negatives that come with it quickly, right? There's people who are motivated by negative. There's people who are motivated by the positives, right? Pain or gain, right? What are you motivated by? But I think the people who have the biggest struggles, when you tell them we need to change something, their mind goes to the limitation, the frustrations that are going to occur, the problems that are occur, and their mind just goes there. Versus the person who says, okay, great, I got it, I'll do it, no problem, right? And I think that's usually the person that looks at it from the other perspective, like, oh, if I change this, I'm going to get these positives. And so why wouldn't I do this, right? Why wouldn't I? And so I think it's easier to some degree for them from a mindset perspective. Do you see that in your work? Like, how do I get, this is a person who's had so much baggage around them, how they were brought up, their mother, their father, their teacher, the preacher, that pre-programming, maybe from early in life, how their default is always the negative, right? And what could go wrong, versus the person who seems to make, at least in my experience, the change is easier is the person who defaults to the positive. Can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, I talk a lot in coaching about things like self-limiting beliefs and narratives. Like, what is that self-talk? What is that inner critic saying to you? And an exercise I've often done with clients, which can be really helpful, is a lot of these folks are really kind and compassionate towards other people, not towards themselves, but towards other people. And you can say to them, what would you say to your best friend? What would you say to your kid if they were dealing with what you're dealing with? And to kind of step out of themselves for a second and say, if I had a child who was struggling with their blood sugar, for example, and just didn't want to stop eating certain things that they knew were impacting that, what would I say to them? Because that's my challenge. And it gets them out of their head a little bit into that emotional kind of compassionate center for them. And they're able to then talk to themselves and change some of those self-limiting beliefs of, I couldn't do this, but if I talk to myself as if I talk to somebody I really care about, I'll give myself compassion, a little bit of room to grow. If I stumble a little bit, it's okay. It's not black and white. That can start to change the tone and tap into that motivation a little bit better.
Yeah, I think there's two things about like our early patterning, right? One is some people use it as a tool to get better and climb the ladder. And some people use it as a crutch to stay where they are, right? In this kind of comfort zone, which is not comfortable, but it's what I know. This is who I am, right? And they don't get out of that. But we're all programmed to some degree. We all have negative things that happen to us in life. And you see some people that just are like, I'm not going to let this, I'm going to use this thing that happened to me in my past, how I grew up, as the springboard for me to be a different person, a better person, and to overcome that. And I really, but you also see those people who are so stuck. Well, my mom always did this to me. My dad always, do you live with them now? No. Are they alive? No. that person or that influence is no longer there, but the patterning and the default is still there. When you come across somebody like that, I think that's the people who, and when it comes to health issues, those are the people who really struggle the most, I think, sometimes to get better. Because unfortunately, I think there's a default that they identify their personality around their illness or behavior sometimes. And like, this is who I am, this is my community, and this, even though I don't feel well, this is comfort to me. And this is maybe off topic just a little bit there, but I know you're talking a little bit about getting somebody maybe to make different changes, or how would you explain this to your kid, but how do you keep them motivated, or I hate to use the word motivated, but driven to change that internal stinking thinking, right? That voice that's in between those 6 inches of your ears, because that internal dialogue is probably the biggest emotional stressors that most people fail, right? So how do you help them change that internal dialogue on a constant, consistent basis from a coaching perspective?
Yeah, so there's an element of that which is around habits. And so what I will do with clients who are in that situation is we break down that first step into the smallest possible thing that they consider a win. And so what you do is you have them then experiment for the following week. Try that out, see what happens, see what comes up for you. And it's really small. And for some of them, it's a breeze. But what we always do, whether they succeed with that kind of baby step or not, is it's about the learning. What did you learn from that experience? And for some folks, what comes up for them is, taking a very small action around them for themselves brings up some of those voices. Yeah, when I went for a walk around the block, I could just hear that negative self-talk. And it said, this step is too small. You're going to fail. You're not going to make any progress. And so we look at that and we say, well, you accomplished what you set to do that week. You kept that commitment to yourself. What does that feel like? And oftentimes they'll say, yeah, that was really impactful. We say, okay, well, given that, what do you want to do next week? And they continue to try it out. And over time, in conversation about what they're learning and the successes that they're seeing, it forms not just a physical habit, it actually forms a mental habit. And so that chatter changes a little bit. The way they talk to themselves changes a little bit. And that starts to build the momentum. And what I often tell my clients is it's not necessarily about the tasks that you're checking off in the treatment protocol. It's about learning how to build habits. Because once they're done working with me, they have these amazing tools in the toolbox, but the most important tool is the tool to learn how to build a new habit. Because I may not be there for them the next time when they need to change another health habit. Maybe they have another health scare on something totally unrelated. How do they meet that challenge? Well, they already know how to build habits because we work together on that specific thing. And that becomes the most powerful tool they have in the toolbox.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think from my perspective, when I'm working with a client, I don't want to just tell them, hey, take this for this. I try and help them understand this is why this is occurring. And some people, they don't like, hey, just tell me what I need to do. I don't care. But I think like a lot of my clients like the idea of understanding why something is a certain way. So then next time, just as you said, next time I come against this kind of experience, now I have an idea of how to help myself because I know what's going on. And it's not a matter of just dumping this into a system where I need to find this bottle to fix it. I can go, okay, this is occurring because have I checked my foundational things? I'm mouth breathing all night. I'm snoring again. This is causing disruption. This is why I'm waking up tired and fatigued. It's not like I'm waking up tired and fatigued because I need some type of medication. It's like, hey, my habits and my behaviors are off. So I think it's really important that when we can, we teach processes and mechanisms versus just protocols, right?
Yeah.
So somebody can help themselves.
And I think this is where the partnership between clinicians and coaches can be really helpful because sometimes there's multiple ways to get at a particular outcome. There are multiple different kinds of treatment protocols that you could deploy as a clinician. And you start with one with a patient, and the patient struggles, but doesn't really let on to you that they're struggling.
Mhm.
But a health coach may be able to surface that and say, you're really struggling with this way to tackle this part of your health challenge. Have you talked with your clinician about another way to tackle that piece of the puzzle? Because there might be something that you were deciding between two treatment protocols, maybe two supplements, maybe two different things that the person could do. You decided on one, but they were pretty neck and neck. If the person struggles with the first one, but it's really easy for them to do the second one, you may never know that. But surfacing that challenge with a health coach may help that patient come back to the table and say, I'm really struggling with this piece. Is there another way that we can get at that? And you might have some creative ideas to tackle that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people can be intimidated by the doctor thing, right? And so, hey, whatever he says, I'm going to listen to what they say, or whatever she says. Whereas if you're working with the coach, you may feel more like on the same level to some degree, where you can have a maybe more honest conversation. And I see that mixed in my client base, where I have some people that are like, they're super comfortable talking to me, and other people that are, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir. Yeah, very like, yeah, whatever you say. But I really do encourage, I want that feedback, because I think that's one of the things that's important for people to understand from a health perspective is we don't know what's right for everybody. We don't. We have, when we look at chemistry, we look at labs, we look at health history, we put together this concept of how we think we want to help somebody given what we have, the limited information we have, and more importantly, the limited information and knowledge base that we have, right? And so, yes, your functional medicine doctor, your medical doctor, they're an expert in something maybe, or well-rounded in something, but they don't have every answer. And I think sometimes patients and clients are so used to being just told what to do, they don't realize the power of their voice and the power of what they feel and experience, and how that can shift and change what we do if we're willing to listen as the physicians to say, all right, we need a different protocol. We need a different support product. We need to dose this. We need to drop it back. We need to increase it. And as the client, it's really important that they have the ability to have that type of conversation with the physician. And if you don't, this is another place where maybe that health coach is a good barrier, because, hey, I feel a little bit more connected to the coach, where I'm not intimidated. I'm not dealing with this so-called expert, right? And nowadays, sometimes the client has more data on a topic, especially their topic, than the physician who's treating them, because they're fully invested in this thing that they're talking about. Whereas the clinician is fully invested in a lot of things, but can't be as detail specific, right? Yeah. So
I'm just gonna say, you nailed the essence of coaching right there. As a coach, I'm not an educator. I'm not the expert in my client's life. I know how to create a session. I know how to hold the right space for the client. I know how to ask the questions that help unlock the motivation. But really what my sessions do is they put the client in the driver's seat. It's all client directed, and that empowers the client to kind of take over the process for themselves. Every session, it's what would be valuable for you to focus on today. I'm not going to tell them what's valuable for them to focus on today. They have to come to the session with that. And so what that starts to unlock over a series of sessions is, oh yeah, as the client, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm accountable for this change. I have to go out there and do the work. I'm going to get questions thrown at me that make me dig deep and think very seriously about what's important, what I value, what my strengths are, what I can leverage here for success that I've done in the past. And I think that rubs off onto the other relationships that they have, not just in their health support network with clinicians, personal trainers, dietitians, but also in the rest of their life. A lot of my clients end up changing things for the better in their life outside of the particular health challenge that we're working on, just because they're building those amazing habits that just generalize that way.
Yeah, so let's talk about stress a little bit. And I was just had something in my mind. I was going to write it down and just as we transition, I forgot. If I think about it, I'll come back to it. But so I think there's three groups of people. I think the middle group doesn't have as much of an issue getting it. But I think the two extremes of people regarding stress are the ones I think where we have the biggest challenge, right? And I'm sure you see this from a health perspective, from a workplace perspective. When we talk about, let's start right now, we'll talk about emotional stress, but let's just talk about stress. Excessive stress is a burden, because we talk about stress as being a thing, not stress itself, but excessive stress that can trigger the danger response. There are lots of people that I work with, that you work with, that say, I know I got a lot of stress around me and I'm working on it. I'm trying to adapt to it and change it. I understand how that stress can impact my physiology. They get it. It's still impacting them, but they're working on it. But then we have the people at one end of the spectrum who have chronic health issues. They may have a lot of challenges in their life as you look at it from an outward perspective, right? And they're like, no stress. Stress doesn't bug me. I can tolerate so much stress. Right? They don't even acknowledge it, and they don't realize that it's having a negative impact on their physiology. I'm sure you've gone into a business and you're like, that guy's overstressed, that lady's overstressed, that one. You can tell from a physical standpoint and how they look, their body shape, their size, how they breathe, right? And you go, man, how do they not realize that they're working in a stressed out vehicle? I mean, this thing that they're calling their body is showing the results of excessive stress, and then we have the other end of the spectrum. You have the person who they're so consumed that they're overstressed, that everything is about stress and right, and they're just, I can't do this, I can't do that. And you're like, listen, it's not that bad, right? And some of those people, you almost have to say, listen, some of these things you're worried about haven't happened and may never happen. Right? You're complaining about some really first world. When I'm frustrated, I kind of say that's a first world problem, right? Let's put it in perspective. It sucks. It's not good. It's a problem. But at the end of the day, that's a first world issue that you're blowing way out of proportion, and you don't even know if it's going to come to fruition, and you're already concerned about it, and it's creating so much havoc, and you know it, and you continue to manifest it, right? So how do you have that conversation with those the people at the two ends of the spectrum, to bring them closer to the middle, which is where they really need to be, to realize that, hey, there is stress, emotional, physical, chemical. It's hormetic if I acknowledge it and aware of it, but it's devastating on either end if you don't acknowledge that it's a possibility, or you over obsess about it as a problem, right?
Yeah. I'll take the second case first. I think as a coach, my first job is to meet the client where they are and really listen and ask questions about. So as you're thinking about that, and you're telling me about kind of how all of these circumstances are stressing you out and consuming you, explain that to me. What's underneath that? What is really important to you that focusing on these things that are stressing you out is delivering for you? And oftentimes it gives them a sense of control to really be focusing on so many details, even if those details are really challenging for them, to be vigilant, that sense of vigilance, because they really need to do these things. And it's the subtleties of language that I often pick up as a coach. When somebody says, I have to, I need to, that's where you pause and you say, tell me about that. You just told me you should be doing something. You need to do something. You have to do something. Let's check your assumptions. What's going on there? And you oftentimes start to get down a few layers and figure out, in work circumstances, that productivity, I can't take a day off because there's an opportunity cost there. If I am not working every moment of every hour of every day, I am not going to be successful. Okay, let's explore that. And then the flip side is the folks who you can tell, you can see it, you can hear it in their bodies. It's showing up, the stress response, but they're like, no, I'm not stressed. And so what I often do with clients in that circumstance is ask them, one, it can be a language issue. For some people, the word stress means something, and it doesn't mean what they're experiencing, what their body is going through. So we can start to talk about other things that explain what their experience is. Oh yeah, I get really amped up for the day. I come into a meeting and I'm like jacked up. I'm ready to go, and somebody says something I don't like. I'm all over it. I pounce on that and I fix it. So there is an amped up reaction there. They're not going to call it stress, but we can deal with it with different language. And reflecting back a client's language can be really powerful. You're meeting them where they are. And you can still make headway in dealing with the symptoms and the narratives and the underlying things related to stress without using stress as the concept or as the word. And the other piece about that is asking them to stop and listen to their body. For some of those folks, it's really difficult to listen to their body. And sometimes I might say, this is not about meditation. Mindfulness and meditation can be completely different things. Just sit down for 5 minutes and just think about what's going on in your head, your arms, your gut, your chest. How does that feel? It doesn't feel so good. When doesn't it feel good? When I'm at work and somebody brings up a problem and I feel like I have to fix it, and I can feel that sense of that thing amping up. Okay, that's really good for you to notice. We're talking about stress there. We're absolutely talking about stress, but we're not talking about it in the terms of stress that people may not resonate with, or may turn them off, or may think doesn't apply to them.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. So maybe the reason, because a lot of people won't sit down and work on breathing. They won't sit down and take some minutes to calm down. And so you wonder, like, why wouldn't somebody take more time to just be introspective, right? Like, what's going on with me? How am I? And I think part of the reason is that they don't want to know. They know there's problems there. And so instead of really taking a look at this and maybe having to confront what this is, whether it's a dietary problem, a sleep issue, a relationship issue, whatever, if I create chaos elsewhere and get so busy creating stress elsewhere, that's going to take up so much other energy. And now I can excuse what's going on with me because I've got all these other things. And you can blame something else and not come back and look at yourself. Would you kind of look at it that way to some degree?
Absolutely. Sometimes it can be easier to keep busy. And I think that's why I focus on the intersection between work and health, because it shows up so often in a work circumstance. And at the end of the day, I will always meet my clients where they are. Somebody may not want to kind of quote go there, and that's okay. And so we'll start in another direction. And sometimes it ends up in that place that they didn't want to go initially. But now that they've started to loosen things up in other areas, they're able to access something in that particular place that they didn't want to go to at first. Because sometimes that resistance is just so heavy, you're not going to gain traction in that area.
Yeah, and they've got such a shield up, like something there. They've created that shield because of some maybe realized or unrealized internal pain or discomfort that they're like, I'm not even going there. Like, it's not an issue. Don't worry about it. Don't talk about it. Right. So go ahead.
To add to that, I think by the time a client gets to me, that's an important step to even just sit down and say, I'm interested in exploring working with a health coach. Like that starts to get traction there. And so it's always important I communicate to them, you've got it within you. No matter what you think you're facing here, you've got the strengths, the power, the motivation within you. We just have to unlock that a little bit. And so then that thing that came down starts to creep up just a little bit and just a little bit more. And we just work with what they have got going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a gentleman, David Goggins. I'm sure you've heard of David Goggins, and he is the uber ultra athlete, Navy SEAL, who's been through his challenges, his demons. He's been overweight, he's underweight, he's had all these issues. And you hear him screaming like on some of the videos and stuff. And I've listened to his book and read his book, and people are like, what's up with that guy? I'm like, he's not yelling at anybody else but himself. We're yelling at that inner demon because it's there and he knows it's there. And for from his perspective, the way to deal with it is to battle it back. And so he keeps fighting it. And sometimes we all have to find a different way to battle those things, right? And so maybe for a David Goggins, it's screaming out into the air like, you can't stop me, right? And doing that. And for somebody else, it may be giving themselves more nurture, more love time, more something else to get them out of it, more positive affirmations, more meditation, whatever it takes. But everybody might have a different strategy. So another thing I want to talk about, because I know we're going to get short on time, and I want to get some key things that people can do to help them with change. But one of the biggest things I think is really important too, when we talk about when somebody's got a challenge with their health or their life or their relationships, is their habits and their behaviors. And to me, I define them differently. I'd like to hear how you define them. So to me, a habit is something that you do without almost even thinking about it. It's done on a repetitive basis. Like for me, I get up and exercise. It's not like it's something that I think about. It's just roll out of bed, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, go down and exercise, go for a run, depending on the day, what it is. I could be on vacation. It's the same thing I do. I'm on a business trip. It's what I do. It is a habit, right? And then there's behaviors. And I look at behaviors like things that we do periodically, right? I have a habit of exercise. Some people have a behavior of exercising. And the difference is if you said, hey, I've got a habit of exercising, how often do you do it? A couple times a month. Well, that's a behavior, right? So that's how I look at it. I'm like, that's a behavior of exercise. So I try and get people to understand that, listen, you can have some bad behaviors and be healthy if you have really good habits, right? Versus what usually walks in and creates problem that with a new client, and you take a look at sometimes what's going on, they have a lot of bad habits and very few good behaviors. And so that's where we need to, I think, from a coaching perspective, from a functional medicine perspective, we need to help them reverse that trend a little bit. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, and I look at behaviors as kind of the building blocks. They're the units. And so you can string together a series of behaviors, and that will turn into a habit if you're consistent with it. The behaviors are also the product of the habit. So your exercise of behavior on a consistent basis is because you have that habit of exercise. So that's fantastic. And the behaviors are kind of the symptoms that are coming out from the habits that you built that are automatic and kind of unconscious. And so being able to link that up for clients and say, look, if you're consistent with doing this behavior over time, that will turn into a habit. That habit will become automatic and unconscious for you. You won't have to think about it. It's going to be challenging now. So let's employ some tips and tricks to make that easier for you to form that habit. And then not only will you know that habit and how to perform that behavior consistently, which is helpful for you, you'll actually know how to build habits in the future, which will be even more powerful for you. It's like that leveling up.
And I think if you have habits and discipline, right? You don't need a lot of rah-rah motivation most times to do things, right? It's just, this is what I do. This is who and I think it's also helpful to have that inner voice, like, who am I? And I think it's that be, do, have model, right? Everybody, I think people want to have, do, be. Like, if you give it to me, then I can do these things, and then I'll, or how did I say, be, do, have. So you got to know you got to know who you are, right? And then you'll do the things to have what you want to have. And a lot of times we see Instagram or TikTok, and we see, look how easy it is to be a professional athlete. All they do is go play on Sunday, right? And we don't see all the hard work. Or we see the person that's robustly healthy on an Instagram post or some other post, and you go, man, I did 30 days of diet, it didn't work. Well, that wasn't 30 days. I don't care what they're selling you. That wasn't 30 days. That was lots of really good habits, good discipline, not much. And they probably didn't need much motivation to get that. And they're trying to condense it for them. So
Yeah. And I love,
go
I
ahead.
love the quote, don't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle. Everybody who's trying to start something, it takes a lot of work to make this happen. And consistency is important. It doesn't have to be perfect. 80-20 for most people is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want, I heard somebody say, if you want to have an easy life, you got to do hard things. If you don't want to do hard things, you're probably going to have a difficult life, right? Because all the hard work allows you to have the trappings sometimes that we can consider happiness, success, wealth, whatever. So
Yeah.
let's end with a couple things. I'll let you go ahead, say what you want to say, and then I'll let you finish up with something.
I just wanted to go back to the be, do, have piece, because that being part is so critical. It's understanding what's important to you. What do you value? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Because that is always the thing that you come back to as the North Star, the anchor point. When things are particularly challenging, I don't want to get up early tomorrow, but I do want to have that thing in 5 years. And I know what's important to me. Okay, I'm up. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think and we talked about this before, whether you use negative things that have happened to you as your motivational force to be who you're going to be. I'm not going to be that. I want to be this person. So this is the things I'm going to do. So that doesn't become me. And this is who I am. Right. Or you can say, look at that guy. That's who I want to be. And I know I got to do these things for me to be like that. And so you put those things in place. So use positive or negative, however it works with each of the different things. So we know change can be difficult. We know change can create a lot of stress, but if we had to wrap up with like 5 things that you think somebody could do on a daily basis, 5 habits that would help somebody reduce their overall stress load once it became a habit, right? And help them have a better relationship life, business life, health life, what would those 5 things be?
I would say the first 2 are related. 1, set an intention. Try and set an intention every day. Here's what I intend to do today. And that could be an action. That could be just a state of being. I want to be more calm today. And the related one, number 2, coming with that is the discipline of debrief. At the end of the day, reflect back on your intention. And even if you didn't fulfill that intention, the mere reflection on that is helping you change. To say, I saw a gap. I intended to do this. I didn't do it. Seeing that gap is really important for that change. Another one that I love related to habits is called habit stacking. Find something that you do automatically. It's already a habit for you, and link that new thing you want to do up to that. So I did this when I was an inconsistent flosser, and I actually rubber banded my flosser to my toothbrush. And I didn't have any choice because I brush my teeth religiously, but to look at that flosser and see it and then do them both at the same time. And that's called habit stacking. Another is around figuring out the rewards that really work for you and fit with that vision that you want for yourself health-wise. And so this is another thing tied to work. A lot of people get home from work and they're absolutely exhausted. So going to the junk food, going to the alcohol, going to the other self-medicating measures, what else feels good and would be a great swap with that? Jump in a bath, take a shower when you get home because it's been a stressful day, you're a little sweaty. Maybe that will help relax you a little bit. Maybe hit the gym for somebody who hasn't been doing that. That can be a way to switch the reward and help create that routine that works a little bit better. Mindset is also huge. And I'd say the 2 biggest mindsets I come back to are experimental mindset. Just try something out and then come back and try something out again if the first time didn't work. And the other is the beginner's mindset. If you're just starting something, be curious. Be curious with yourself. How is this going for me? What am I learning? What's coming up for me emotionally, physically? Holy smokes, I'm really sore from this activity that I've been doing. Do I need to take a day off? Yeah, it's okay. I'll get back on the horse next time. So those last 2, I'd say, are around mindset, being experimental and having that beginner's mindset.
Yeah, and I think one of yours, like the debrief, I call it an after action report. Like at the end of the day, what did I want to accomplish? What did I accomplish? And I think the reason to build on that of why that's important is we all set out to do a lot of things sometimes and we don't get them all done. And you can beat yourself up about the things that didn't get done. But if you do an after action report at the end of the day, like, okay, I got these 6 of those 7 things accomplished, that's a good day. If you think about it, somebody who practices shooting free throws or doing, some type of sport, a batter, a good batting average is like 30%, right? Of hits. And so they're like, yes, I'm an all-star, right? And if we don't get everything done, we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get anything accomplished today. So having that after action report, I would also say that the 50, I call it the 50-50 rule, right? Which is 50% of the time you're going to be right, and 50% of the time you might be wrong, right? So just make a decision. I think one of the things that creates so much stress is failing to make a decision. And ultimately you do make a decision when you fail to choose, but somebody else is often making the decision for you. And so don't be afraid of failure. I mean, there's a great book called Failing Forward. And in that book, the whole idea is when you fail, you learn and you go, okay, that didn't work out. So what can I do better next time? And I think if you keep that mindset and you have that after action report and you do some of those other things that you talked about, the stacking of the habits, I think all of those things are really good ways. Incremental changes are all great ways to change. And I think the last one I would add is don't compound the negatives. And we all have negative things that happen, negative experiences. And sometimes, and I think you had a different name for it, but sometimes something bad happens. So then we say, well, then I'm throwing, and it's all going to go out the window. And I think sometimes when things are going bad, you just have to say, okay, I'm going to walk away from this and go do something positive or something that's stressful, good stress. And that can help you kind of neutralize what's going on. But instead, what sometimes happens is, hey, I'm a bad argument, bad work, therefore bad diet, more alcohol, poor sleep, and it just compounds. And the problem is that becomes somebody's daily activity, daily routine. They don't even realize the chaos going on because this is just how my life is. And sometimes if you don't compound the negatives, you start to see, oh, and when I exercised, I didn't have all that. I felt better or whatever. So anyway, I know you got a hard stop, so I want to get you off to that. We can finish this conversation up on another podcast, and awesome. We'll talk about things. Before I let you go, can you just give some people, if they want to work with Will, right? I know you've got a website, you got a company. Can you just give some people some information where they can find you? I'll post some of this stuff on the show notes, but give some people some information where they can hear more about Will and what he does.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Eric. And great conversation, by the way. Would love to continue at any time. LinkedIn, great place to find me. My website is workinghealthier.com. And I also co-founded a business called Well Leaders, which is really focused on well-being as a foundation for leadership. So any leaders who are out there who are interested in this topic, that's another place.
Awesome. Well, for the listeners, hopefully you got all the way through this. You got some good tips for this. We'll have Will back on the podcast because I have a bunch more questions I didn't get a chance to ask. I've got a whole bunch written down here on my little sticky notes. So we'll get you back. Will, thanks so much for coming on. And for the listeners, if this content is helpful and you get benefit out of it, and I get a lot of commentary that from people like they listen to every podcast, they listen over 2 or 3 times, continue to share the podcast with friends and family. It's not just about thyroid physiology, but it's about how to improve your health and your overall well-being. So continue to listen, continue to share the message. We'll have a great day, have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.